Welcome to another episode of the Unveiled podcast, where today it is my delight and privilege to interview Heather Lee. Heather is the director of Medicine Women Retreats. She is a licensed psychotherapist, educator, speaker, and consultant on mind-body medicine and integrative mental health with over 25 years of experience. Heather is a certified psychedelic assisted psychotherapist, has training in mind-body medicine from the Harvard Mind-Body Medical Institute, and is the past director of women's wellness education at the University of Virginia Medical Center. Heather's depth of understanding and expertise in the soul and science of integrative wellness and psychedelic experiences equip her perfectly to design, define, and deliver meaningful, magical, and medicinal psilocybin experiences. She has an array of exclusive retreats for men, women, couples, and people on cancer journeys. Now, this conversation goes in several different places, but we focus around psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, the variety of psychedelics that Heather has experiences with, why psilocybin was, quote, her medicine, that was my words, not Heather's, and the experiences she's had for herself and also with many of her clients in using psilocybin. You will have heard me mention cancer. Heather's story started with a very serious cancer diagnosis for herself. This story is one of those really interesting ones where we understand that there is more to healing than we think from the conventional medical lens. Heather is a true example of that. She's also fastidious, as I am, about the way these psychedelic therapies are delivered and the quality of support that is around during and after psychedelic medicine. So we speak a lot today about this topic: how, whether, why, when, all of the things about psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. And I share a little bit more about what we're doing at Kuya and the intention behind bringing ketamine assisted psychotherapy back into our services. But this is really a conversation with Heather about what she does, where she goes to deliver some of the substances that are still not legal in the US, and how she truly takes medicine to a whole new level by using her experience as a counselor and a psychotherapist and adding in the support of, in particular, psilocybin, but also MDMA and other psychedelic medicines. I am really excited for today's conversation. We were just talking for a little brief moment before we started recording, and I feel very strongly like we are going to have a lot to talk about today. So, Heather, welcome to the Unveiled podcast.
Well, Victoria, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to speak with you today.
Yes, and people who have read the show notes or the little bio, heard the little bio, will already understand a little bit of why you and I are on a very similar wavelength about various things. But I really want to use today to understand your journey and how we ended up where we are with what you do. But let's begin for our listeners to just sort of explore and explain how you serve.
Yeah, so I am a licensed clinical social worker. I've been a therapist for over 30 years to date myself a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then just recently, in the last, year and a half, became a certified psychedelic assisted psychotherapist. So in my journey as a mental health professional, I've always been really interested in non-ordinary states of consciousness, guided imagery, dream work, mindfulness, meditation, and this, ability to sort of step into the psychedelic work just felt like such an incredible fit. And it has been profoundly shifting the work that I do. And upon receiving this certification, I went to Jamaica and spent 3 months doing a deep dive working with psilocybin, and just really am excited to talk to you all about how this has so many incredible applications for health and healing.
I love that because, as people, my listeners will know, I am incredibly passionate about people who do this properly. I live in Austin, Texas. So the psychedelics are like everywhere here. And there's a lot of experimentation, and there's a lot of people who are doing this from one perspective. And so hearing you speak about the kind of beginning in mental health disciplines and then having this as the next step really makes me feel confident about your ability to talk to how to do this if you're going to start to use this, especially in your therapeutic work. So when did that begin for you? So you mentioned that there's been 30 years but when about in all of the kind of re-legalization of all of these things, did it start to come across your horizon this was an avenue that you could go down?
Well, I think as I was following, so part of my career, there was a period of time when I was working with hospice and palliative care
Mm.
and people with at end of life. And so when I started reading about the Johns Hopkins work, which is very focused, I think you had Bill Richards on, did you not? He
I
is
did,
so
yeah.
lovely.
Yeah.
And so following his work with psilocybin for end of life anxiety just
Yeah.
spoke to me so
Yeah.
deeply. So I
Mhm.
was following and looking at all of that work and then realizing the applications that that would have for my work, not only with people with end of life, but I do a lot of work with young adults who are having incredible amount of eco anxiety and eco distress,
Uh-huh. Mm.
deeply concerned about the future of the planet and what that means. So there's a lot of overlap with working with this medicine for eco anxiety and eco distress, just like it, because it's also a form of existential distress.
Mm.
So that really, I think, really started me on the path of I need to study this medicine. I need to work with this medicine and do a really solid training. So I became certified through the Integrative Psychiatry Institute's
Mm.
program and
Mhm.
graduated in their first cohort. And I'm glad that you mentioned about that I come to this after 30 years of being a mental health professional because I have concern when I see people getting into this field that just have done a lot of psychedelics and think that that qualifies them.
Yeah.
And I have journeyed over 150, close to 200 people, and it is very unpredictable what's going to come up. People
Right.
might think, oh, I'm just doing this for personal growth and exploration. And
Mhm.
the next thing you know, we've uncovered some, suppressed childhood sexual abuse.
Mhm.
And I have seen this time and again. You need to be a really highly skilled, trained mental health professional to
Mhm.
be taking people on journeys on these medicines.
Mhm. Mm. I appreciate you saying
Absolutely.
that. I really I don't have anyone on my podcast who doesn't also echo that sentiment
Yeah.
because I'm a functional medicine practitioner. I run the medical programs at a place where we will eventually be using ketamine assisted psychotherapy to begin with.
Yeah.
The reason they placed me in the role that I am is because I am the skeptic. I am the no, this has to be done in an integrated way. I am the one who kind of makes
Yeah.
sure that everything that we do is from the whole human, not just this new drug thing. And it's really interesting to me to feel like there are voices out there who are saying this is great stuff, but it has to be done in the right way. And I'm also training in somatic experiencing and knowing what you can trigger and how
Mhm.
skilled you need to be to get back from that moment is it just add in a psychedelic, add in a plant medicine, it feels like the risks are exponential actually. And so I really love the diligent care that it sounds like you take and that you, I suppose, promote in your work.
Absolutely. And that the work comes with once the material comes up. It's not just about ingesting these medicines.
Yes.
They just bring to the surface all the rich material that then skilled therapists and clinicians need to help people work with. So the work really begins when the journey ends.
Mm,
And so making sure that people are setting up programs where they're working with people in an ongoing, extended period of time after somebody's been on the medicine and had that journey and that container we create has to be longitudinal.
hmm. Yeah, and I want to dig into all of the kind of like applications in a moment, but I was looking on your website and I noticed that you do offer integration support for people.
Yes.
What does that look like for you in your practice?
Yeah, so I actually have people finding me who have done their own journey work, maybe had a difficult experience on ayahuasca. I find a lot of people have these big experiences on ayahuasca in these foreign countries
Yeah.
and then leave and aren't getting that really good support
Mm,
following up. And I'm also seeing in the ketamine field, and I know you're going to do this the right way, but there are people doing it the wrong way where they
right.
just set up these clinics and they're just confusing people and then sending them home and there's no therapy and no counseling whatsoever, which is
Mhm,
also terrifying.
mhm,
But so in my practice, I will just people come onto my caseload as private clients, and we do weekly sessions working with the material that they've encountered on their journey, and
mhm,
really making sure that we really integrate that with somatic practices and cognitive behavioral and all the other tools that are available to really kind of work with that material so that it can help them make the shifts,
mm,
rewire their brain process those traumas differently, restore things differently while they still have that neuroplastic state after having had, their plant medicine experience.
Sure. Yeah. And uh, I love anyone who offers anything vaguely resembling integration. It feels like it's so important. And it feels like you're so right. There's this kind of destabilization, especially if you go to like some foreign country to take some strange medicine with some indigenous cultural people that you have, especially us Westerners, have
Yeah.
no concept of. And suddenly you're expected to just go back to normal life.
Yeah.
It doesn't kind of make any sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're seeing a lot of that. I think, that's sort of the risky side of this, wild west of the resurgence of psychedelics
Hmm.
is that there are people who are really interested and want to try these medicines. And they're, people hanging out shingles that shouldn't. They're people that, traveling to countries and just doing things they don't really understand.
Yeah.
So another part of, my practice is really trying to set myself up to be a resource and
Right.
guide not only for therapists, but for other people's clients, for the community at large. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's important.
Yeah. And we can, just to help our listeners, we can talk about like going to foreign countries and doing ayahuasca, but also the US based telehealth ketamine, which just seems crazy to us. We are just like, this feels deeply unsafe. Also, not wise.
I
Just-
totally agree. Totally agree. I don't even know how that is allowed to be happening.
no.
And, and they're really setting people up for almost using it in an addictive type way. They're
Right.
like, oh, yes, let us just ship you your, ketamine at home that you can just take on your own. Like, and you should probably do it all the time. It's just
Yeah,
unethical.
you should do it all the time, but call it microdosing. And so you can convince
Yeah.
yourself that it's actually okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Disconcerting. So
Very.
people like you and I and you having me on this podcast, it's important to be having these conversations and really speaking out about what are good practices with
Mhm.
these medicines.
Yeah. And you mentioned psilocybin, and I'm really interested, everyone I speak to, I'm really interested as to why the drug of choice, if you like. And
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
what was it about psilocybin that grabbed you? Was it research or just the essence of it? Like, what was your journey with this medicine like?
So I think like many people, my first psychedelic experience was in college. And, I remember I sort of fell in with this group that some deadhead hippie types, but I immediately knew from the first time I journeyed on psilocybin that this was something I didn't want to do after dark around a lot of people. And like, I wanted to do this. I was a day tripper from the get go.
Right.
So I would take this and go out into the mountains. And I literally was like the little field trip leader. I had it with all my friends and I'd say, well, if we're going to do mushrooms, let's do them on Saturday. Let's bring journals. Let's bring magnifying glasses and binoculars. And I would have like a little field trip bag and we would go out and just hang in nature doing all this cool stuff. I mean, literally, I remember one time getting everybody magnifying glasses and we all lay on our stomachs and like watched ants like march and move things. And so I was always sort of doing what I didn't even realize was nature immersion. So now part of my practice is, using nature immersion and ecotherapy. But so that's what the psilocybin to me was about, deeply connecting with nature and with myself and with the spiritual component. I was also very interested in Native American practices. I was reading a lot of what was I reading at the time? I'm going to blank. Don Carlos. The Carlos Castaneda books.
Yeah.
That was my jam. So, so that's kind of where it began for me. And then later coming back to this now, you
Hmm.
know, I see how all of the beauty of it is I'm 60 years old and I get to like go back to my little hippie roots and call it and have that be part of my practice now.
Hmm.
So I'm still taking people out in nature with little magnifying glasses and doing different things with different levels of psilocybin because it's not just that deep dive. There's
Hmm.
some psycholytic work where people are on lower doses
Hmm.
and can be interactive. That's
Yeah.
also interesting.
I'm going to make one comment and then I want to dig into more of what you just said. But like, we were having a conversation about various medicines yesterday in our team. I don't know how it came up. I think I was joking and like
Yeah.
just saying, like, maybe we should just get some MDMA. And then I was recommending morphine And then, but then our clinical operations lady was just like basically saying, yeah, no, the only way I'll do mushrooms is if I can then go out kayaking. And
Yeah.
it just speaks exactly to what you just said in terms of it is a nature connecting
Yeah.
molecule essentially. And so she
Yeah.
was explaining, she's like, you can hear the flap of every bird wing and everything. So she's very
Yeah.
much extolling the virtues of it that way. So yeah. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So how do you work with it differently then, if it's bigger doses or smaller doses? What are the different effects? Like, what are the applications from a clinical perspective, from a clinical like psychotherapeutic perspective? What do you see as the greatest applications of psilocybin in particular?
Well, I do think the heroic doses and the large doses that we use in sort of clinical and therapeutic capacities really are where you see the incredible rewiring of the brain and changing of your relationship around trauma and past experiences and being able to really rewire around those things and
Mhm,
have a whole new relationship to material that's been challenging in the past and maybe kept you locked in anxiety and depression.
mm,
So, that work is really powerful and really important. And I am a big fan of doing that in a group setting and retreat setting.
yeah,
So I think there's so much to be said for people holding space for each other, for processing the experiences together, for creating almost like a sense of community around this experience. I
mhm,
think there's a whole other layer of healing that happens when it's done in that capacity. So a
mhm,
lot of my work is with women and women with life transitions, women with breast cancer, and I just think that creates this other layer of just lovely health and healing and connection.
mhm,
So deep dive, large doses in group and retreat formats, I am really, really a big fan of. But I also am, the psycholytic dosing, which is when you take a very small amount,
mhm,
it's not microdosing. Microdosing is sub-perceptual,
yeah,
but a small dose, like a gram, and taking people out in nature where you can lead them through activities,
mm,
through ecotherapy activities, through different experiences, and work with them, having conversation and creating interactive experiences is also really powerful and sort of yet to be discussed too much as this field emerges.
yeah.
So it's an area that I'm pretty keen on developing and am, working on developing some programs that really help people access that, especially, like I said, around the eco anxiety and eco distress.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think it's becoming more of a conversation now in terms of we're talking about how can you actually not have a dose where you're completely in an altered state of consciousness? How can we still be a little bit human
Yeah,
whilst also having a different perception of reality? Because it just facilitates different neural pathways, different kind of relationships to be built that then hopefully has some transfer into when you are, back into an ordinary state of consciousness.
absolutely. And the real sweet spot, which is, again, not legal to do yet, but a little MDMA, a little psilocybin out in nature. Oh, yeah.
Okay, we're going to go here now, and I'm going to come back to your personal story in a minute. But I was going to come on to MDMA because I know that you're a MAPS certified MDMA therapist. Is that also true?
Yes.
So, talk to
Yes.
me about what that looked like from a training perspective. Talk to me about how that translates into your practice. What is that? What is that for you?
Yeah. So, MDMA is an empathogen. I mean, what a lovely thing, right? So it creates this really open hearted space. And so it's fabulous for PTSD, fabulous for couples work, fabulous to revisit things that have been difficult to speak about, but to visit those things with MDMA on board puts
Right.
you in this place where you can look at the hard stuff from this new perspective. And again, sort of take it out of the hard drawer, look at it, and put it back differently.
Hmm.
So, my training was a lot looking at how to use that with couples, how to use it with trauma,
Hmm.
PTSD,
Hmm.
and again, we're just waiting on that becoming legal. And I think that might be one of the things we see sooner than later, maybe in 2024, which is exciting.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's a really, really lovely medicine that I have seen people have really profound shifts on.
Hmm.
A little more cautious about some of the potential medical side effects there, just in the,
Right.
people with high blood pressure, cardiac issues, because there is sort of an amphetamine component to it.
Hmm.
Um, but I think it's a very powerful and lovely medicine that can be really, really impactful for people. Again, PTSD, trauma, and couples work. really exciting with couples work.
Yeah. It's interesting to me as well how leaders in the field now are combining the synthetic, pharmaceutical molecules with the natural plant medicines and kind of finding these synergies and balances and harmonies. It
Yeah.
feels like we're at a really kind of creative time.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think when you said, why do I feel drawn to psilocybin, medicine of choice? And I think I do feel very drawn to it because it is a plant medicine,
Mm,
because, you know, psilocybin, that wonderful little fungi, is not a plant or an animal, but something closer to an animal. It's like a sentient being.
right.
And my little hippie self just loves that. I feel like it's talking directly to us. Like it's
Mhm.
something that we consume it and then it talks to our brains. And I just love
Well, and
that.
just for anyone who isn't aware of quite what you're speaking to, why don't you just
Yeah.
explain a little bit about what this psilocybin, these kind of mushroom things are, and why they're closer to animals, and how they are so connecting and so connected to nature?
Yeah. So fungi is this category of living creature. I have to say creature because it's not categorized as a plant and it's not quite an animal, but we do believe it is a sentient. Although we're starting to find that out about trees too, that we think that they communicate with one another.
Right.
Um, so it's also one of the oldest living organisms they think ever on the planet Earth,
Hmm.
and there's something rather magical about that as well.
Hmm.
So I don't really remember what your question was, like, but
No, just that was perfect in terms of like, and people like to think that mushrooms are vegetables that we eat. I'm
yeah,
like,
oh, right, right, right.
there's kind of this whole
Well, and
structure.
then, but the mycelium. Okay, so mycelium connects everything. If you turn over a dead branch or on the ground and you see that little white like hair like stuff, that's mycelium, and it's all throughout. Underneath the ground, and everything is talking to everything. Trees miles away from other trees will send a message to those trees saying, there's a fire happening here. You guys better prepare down there. I mean, there's nature is so much more than we have unfortunately we're so disconnected from.
Yeah.
And so these plant medicines bring us back in a really powerful way to this understanding of the interconnectedness, and that cannot be coincidence. I mean, that's something fascinating, and there is a reason it's called magic mushrooms. There's sheer This psychedelic medicine is where like spirituality and science meet. I mean,
Right.
it's you just can't escape the fact that we can't totally explain why these compounds act on your serotonin receptors, yet you have these profound mystical experiences and get these downloads of information.
Mm.
Like I said, there's reasons called magic mushrooms.
Mhm. I love it because I'm a nutritionist by trade, and like we learned very early on, and it's not even questioned that taking
Yeah,
a supplement is not the same as eating the vegetable. So if you're taking like
yeah,
sulforaphane, it's not the same as eating the broccoli, which has a lot more complexity to it. And it's like this is the same thing. It's like we're
yeah,
not we don't know everything, and I've been doing a lot of contemplation on like why are all these plant medicines here, and I think in
yeah,
so many ways they are connecting us more deeply to our humanness by connecting us more
yeah.
deeply to the natural world from which we come.
Yes, absolutely. Are you familiar at all with Sam Gandy's work? He's a
No.
Oh my goodness, you need to look up Sam Gandy. So
Okay.
Sam Gandy, besides being absolutely adorable, he's a researcher at the London Imperial College. He's an ecologist
Right.
turned psychedelic enthusiast, and he does amazing research
Right.
um, in this whole field. But
Yeah.
you should interview him if you can. He's
I will
just,
definitely look him up, pop him in the show notes, and try and get an
yeah,
interview with him. Because anyone who's kind of like trying to understand it, but not from a I need to make this, I need to reduce this down to what is happening in the brain when I do this thing. Because
yeah,
I think that's doing a disservice to some, especially the plant medicines, less so the
yeah,
sort of chemical ones, but the plant medicines, it's like it's way more than just a neurotransmitter impact. It has to
yeah,
be because we can do that
yeah,
with neurotransmitters with medication, and you're not
yeah,
having some kind of psychedelic experience.
yes.
So yeah. So I would like you to tell us a bit of your journey with these plant medicines. I know that anyone who gets into this world tends to have a personal
Mm,
story, and you mentioned a brief sort of headline version of it before we press record. I'd love you to share with our listeners what this has meant to you personally and where you managed to move through and from with using psychedelics or
yeah.
psilocybin.
Well, Yes, because I, started coming into this field before I had this really profound experience. And here's how this came about. And I don't believe in coincidence at all.
Mhm.
So, literally, the week that I completed my certification as a psychedelic assisted psychotherapist, a year-long training with some of the top researchers at Johns Hopkins, NYU, very, in-depth training. The
Mhm.
week that I got that certification, I got a phone call. I had just had a mammogram and I was told I had breast cancer.
Mm.
And I thought, well, that's like not in my plans. But that was also like, that just doesn't seem like a coincidence that those things just happened in the exact same week. And
Mm.
I thought, you know what? I need to take a dose of my own medicine, so to speak. And
Mm.
I did a very large heroic dose of
Mhm.
psilocybin with a brand new breast cancer diagnosis.
Yeah.
And if you want to talk about, dancing with the devil, facing your demons, being on a journey when you're like questioning your mortality and
Yeah.
it was really, there were some times that was really, really scary.
Yeah.
I had times when I was like, wait a minute, is this just a dream or did I really just get diagnosed with cancer? And my God, what does that mean? I mean, it was pretty intense,
Yeah.
but there also came this incredible download of information that this, for me, that this breast cancer was fear turned cellular
Right.
and that this was intergenerational
Mhm.
patterns of fear-based thinking from
Mm.
my mother and my grandmother around scarcity and partnership,
Mm.
and it really rung true for me. And I
Yeah.
was at the time in a brand new marriage, but I found myself being all weird about money and all my old triggers about that. And so the messaging I got was you need to address these fear-based patterns of thinking and
Mm.
you need to release this fear. And I kept getting it over and over. You need to live joyfully. You need to live joyfully. Now, my mother had gotten breast cancer at the exact same age I just got this diagnosis.
Mm.
And my mother chose to do, a little lumpectomy, a little this, a little that. It came back 15 years later and claimed her life. So I also saw this as an opportunity to walk the path differently
Mm.
and to learn from this, the information I got about what was going on. The medicine let me understand what was going on a psycho spiritual energetic level
Mm.
that I could work with. But I also decided my mom's name was Joy and she died of breast cancer. And I kept getting this message, live joyfully, live joyfully.
Mhm.
So part of my integration and my healing when I work with this. So I got a double mastectomy. I was like, just take everything. We're not messing around. Who needs that? And so I'm good. I didn't need any chemo, no radiation. I basically just got, a new rack. We're good. But I'm not a tattoo person, but I'm going to get the word joyful tattooed on the side of my new boob as part of the integration
I love that.
of living joyfully.
Mhm.
And the thing that I'm now, really sort of working with some folks in the oncology and cancer field with women and breast cancer is that doing that journey early in my cancer diagnosis, I
Mm.
felt gave me such a sense of sort of meaning making and where I could have control and power and what I could work on around fear-based patterns of thinking and
Mm.
whether somebody can scientifically or medically say, oh, this is true, isn't, doesn't matter. To
Mm.
me, I was empowered and
Mhm.
I have done things now to heal emotionally and energetically and am so thankful to the mushroom for that.
Mm. Mm. Thank you for sharing that journey. It's working in the kind of functional medicine world. I
Yeah.
did have an oncology practice basically when I was practicing in London. I had some oncology clients. It's always very difficult to have the conversation of like, why is this happening, especially with women and breast cancer. And there's some theories about it's a divorcing of the cells, and it's some kind of like, it's an internal emotional thing. But that's a really hard sell. It's a really hard conversation to have with a client, and it's really difficult to be like, well, what might you have within you that's contributing to this illness, which is fairly devastating. And so what I'm hearing in what you say is that, the mushrooms actually facilitated a completely different relationship with that unpacking of trauma and unpacking of patterns that kind of made it an empowering journey, not a, oh, do I need to feel guilt and shame about all of this stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. And, and I am careful about, you never want to make somebody feel like that oh, well, you created this. Oh,
Mm.
you made this happen to
Yeah.
yourself. Don't want to go down that path.
No.
But for me, yes, it did give me this different sense of, well, there are things that I can just be doing to live more, healthier emotionally,
Mhm.
which may have an impact on my physical health.
Well, absolutely. It can't not. And it's very
Right,
interesting
right.
thing that, so one, my mother is also called Joy.
Yeah.
I've just been away for a weekend recently, and the phrase "the discipline of joy" came up, and it actually has been this kind of like
Yeah.
contemplation that I've been in of like, as adults, we really do need to put effort into the fact that this is supposed to be fun. This thing that we call life
Yeah.
is supposed to contain contentment and happiness and delightful experiences. And I feel like however we get there, like having
Yeah.
that approach is really vital. And do you find that that's something that you've just carried forward? Do you feel like that has been almost innate to you since that time, or has it taken work?
It took integrating the material,
Hmm.
but I honestly, and this is what the research bears out, when people have just even one profound experience on this medicine,
Yeah.
the shifts are long lasting. And
Mm.
I feel, I mean, I have just released so much anxiety and fear, and I am now living this place of really like trust and faith, and it's at a really deep core level that I truly just am in this place of trusting the unfolding of life and being less about trying to control,
Yeah.
which only created the fear. And
Yeah.
now it's like just a release. So I see that and feel that on a really deep level.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And so, what do you see with your kind of clients? You mentioned that you work with oncology departments. Are you kind of working with cancer patients actively at the moment?
I'm working with somebody who she and I are developing. So I don't have, I've worked with a few clients privately. Again, obviously, this is not work that we can be doing in a big capacity legal way.
Hmm.
But I've certainly consulted with and worked with some of my, clients who have been on cancer journeys.
Hmm.
But right now, I'm actually working with another woman, and we're looking at how to really bring this via weekend workshops that have other elements of health and wellness so that we can really combine different modalities for women who are on cancer journeys so they have access to all sorts of different healing modalities.
Well, that's great. That
Yeah.
feels like, well, I would say this because it's what I do, but it feels like holistic integrative care packages seems to be
Yeah.
like the best way to be. It feels like for us, especially here, it's like the ketamine stuff that we do is one tool in a
Yeah.
bigger, broader physical, emotional, mental health package, along with community. I want to double click on what you said earlier about
Yeah.
group retreats. Like, we have a big community center here because we put community at the center of healing, because it's like we are disconnected like from our fellow human, and until we can find a way to be in relationship with people, even in the midst of all our stuff, it feels like we're kind of not doing this thing right somehow.
Yeah. Totally agree. And I think there's something powerful too about women healing together and coming together to support each other, especially with things like, breast cancer that is such a something that happens in the landscape of women's lives, and there's so much power in, and that power piece, like taking in, what can I do, how do I feel empowered, because it can feel so, you can feel like such a victim when this thing is happening sort of to you and to your body, and the medical system kind of, they just feed you in
Hmm.
to the machine that is the cancer industry
Yeah.
in America. So this is a way to claim some power and via community and what you can be doing for your own health and healing. Even if it's, even if the cancer may end up being terminal, it doesn't mean you have to lose your power in the
Hmm.
process.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing to say. I have never been diagnosed with any kind of cancer, but I have had my own kind of like health diagnoses, which feel like somebody's taken your body away from you somehow. It's like somebody's like it's gone over there somewhere and it's no longer
Yeah,
yours. And it strikes me that some of these tools that we can use really help us actually claim back ownership of the vehicle that we do live in, without it feeling like some aliens just landed and taken our body somewhere with a
yeah,
labeling thing.
yeah,
Yeah. So in terms of like what you're doing now and also the future of the field, how involved are you in kind of thinking, because obviously with these you seem to be have been very early in the field, like the first
yeah.
cohort trained in, certain elements, and then, with MAPS training. So where is the field going as far as you're concerned? And what are you seeing on the horizon for this field?
Yeah, and I think it's tricky to know at the moment.
Mm.
Oregon and Colorado are really trying to lay out the regulations with the the boards about how this is going to look and who's allowed to practice and in what capacity and where. And, we have to be cautious it doesn't become an elitist medical model because it's so expensive. So that makes me a little bit nervous.
Yeah.
Oregon makes me a little bit nervous because the folks that are getting trained as what they're calling licensed facilitators
Hmm.
aren't master's level mental health people.
Yeah.
They're getting good training, they're getting 150 hours or something, but I happen to think you need to come to this as a master's level mental health professional.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot that's going to kind of shake out in the next few years. And, I don't know that we know exactly what it looks like right now in the States, because as we've sort of already touched on, there's the clinical model, there's the medical model where people are going into a clinic. You've got two therapists staring at you while you're lying there doing your journey.
Yeah.
That's very cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure that's the setting that's really most people are looking for.
Right.
So I'm hoping there'll be more retreat centers and healing centers where people can do this in more of a retreat type model. I'm hoping that we see applications for the personal growth and development, not just for depression and anxiety, that there will be a spectrum of opportunities to use this. And as we talked about, that maybe not all of it is macro dose work with this medicine either. Maybe we see some moving into the psycholytic dosing. So I think there's a lot to still kind of open up,
Mm.
and we'll see how that goes. In the meantime, I do a lot of work abroad because I want to be able to do this work. So I lead retreats in Portugal, and I've been doing trainings for doctors in Jamaica, and just working where I can, when I can, and
Mm.
with who I
So
can.
what does psychedelics look like in Jamaica and Portugal? I wouldn't know. So, like, well, how does it look in the rest of the world? Like, I'm aware this is a very US centric conversation, unless we cover how the rest of the world is
Yeah.
expanding to these medicines.
Well, so, Jamaica has for a long time been sort of the hub of psilocybin activity because it is completely, legal and used quite. So that's where, I went down and did my training. I spent 3 months doing deep dive in working with psilocybin with one of the leading psychedelic retreat groups down there. So lots of people are traveling down there and spending, a week doing like 3 doses over the course of the week
Mm-hmm.
in retreat settings. Um, some of the islands in not Turks and Caicos, the Grenadines are trying to open up to be another hub for psychedelics.
Yeah.
Portugal, it's decriminalized, but really nobody, I mean, there's a lot of legal activity, people doing this quite above board
Mm-hmm.
there, as well
Mm-hmm.
as in Mexico, as long as the medicine is provided by a medicine person. So there are lots of opportunities to do these medicines in other countries
Mm-hmm.
legally.
Yeah.
And of course, Holland and the Netherlands.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels like America's always kind of behind like, some of
Yeah.
this stuff. It feels like, and especially, we know people in Colorado where they're pushing for things, and every state, because of, I think, just the way the US is set up, every state feels kind of different about it. So,
Yeah.
we need certain medical professions to administer ketamine here. We need certain
Yeah.
doctors on sites, and we need certain, and it just feels very like it's a problem that is yet to be solved in America, I suppose, because of the complexity of our healthcare system. Yeah. But so,
Exactly. Exactly.
and so in terms of your kind of, what is your favorite thing to take people through? Is it one of these week-long psilocybin retreats where they take 3 doses? Is it, the longer integration containers? Where does your heart lie with how you really believe that this medicine should be delivered for maximum benefit?
Yeah, well, a lot of my work, as I said, is with women and midlife women, such as
Mm,
myself. I am my demographic. I mean, I love to work with midlife women who are at a crossroads,
mm,
who are maybe gone through a divorce, are really questioning the what's next in the next phase of life. Maybe breast cancer is part of what they're struggling with. But I love to do small, intimate weekends
mhm,
where you just have one large journey on that weekend that's supported in a small, safe container, and
mhm,
then working with those women on the flip side with the one on one, and also by creating, occasional group integration sessions. So creating these little sort of mini communities is really sort of my sweet spot in working with this. I love to work with women who are, I would say, psychedelically naive, who are interested in this medicine, haven't had an experience, are a little bit nervous. And I love to create really safe, small containers where you can step into exploring this medicine in a really personally supported little community with other women on a small weekend retreat. So that is really where I just love to work. That's the space I love to create
Mm-hmm.
and work. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the sound of that. And this may be a difficult question to answer, but you've shared with us a little bit about your journey and your benefit and your experience. What kind of experiences do you mainly get with these women? Is it different every time? What sort of like case reports could you give us in terms of the benefits of doing this work with someone like yourself?
Well, I'd say it is different every time,
Mm,
and I think people, as much as we, work on intention on the front end, people think they know what they're looking to sort of problem solve or question, but the mushroom knows. I always say the mushroom knows exactly what needs to come to the surface to be healed. So I also say what meets you is meant for you.
yeah.
And it's always different. And I've worked with quite a few women who have, things come up, they maybe repressed memories about sexual trauma earlier. So those things can come up, but it's never more than you're able to process. I mean,
Right.
we don't go anywhere. There's this lovely sort of mechanism that almost keeps you in the window of tolerance. And again, in as really supported with a therapist, whatever it is that comes up, I feel like we're able to work with that. And it is healing and it is powerful to have it come up so it can be healed.
Mm,
Um, I would say the main thing that, all the women I work with, there's a sense of empowerment, of
mm,
feeling much more confident in your ability to manage your emotions,
mhm,
to master material that has been challenging in the past, and just to feel more of a sense of control and trust of your ability to navigate your life journey, and the emotions that come along with processing our
mm,
experiences. I
mm.
think everybody comes away with an increased sense of feeling personal empowerment.
Mm. Wow. Wow. You mentioned it slightly earlier as well. I would really love your take on set and setting. So if
Yeah.
anyone's been in this kind of like psychedelic world, knows even a little bit about it, people talk about it a lot. And I just love your view on what's important and what elements you feel are really essential for creating these beautiful containers, which you've just described.
Yeah. Well, I think the set, which is sort of talks about mindset.
Mhm,
And, I've had some folks that I've said, you know what, I don't think you're in the right space to do this right now. So
mm,
it's not that this medicine is not for everybody.
mhm,
And it really has to be sort of the right time and place. And I've encountered a few people who, there's too much new raw material that maybe is something they need to look at while they're just in a normal therapeutic capacity before they go diving into the psychedelic
mhm,
exploration.
mm,
So I think it's really important to screen people and to have realistic expectations of what the medicines can and cannot do for you, and how you're going to work with that.
mm.
So for the set, I think it's important that people are in the right mindset to go into this,
Yeah.
and that is carefully screened by the person they're going to work with. And
Yeah.
then setting, I think it's really important to be in an environment where you know that you have the privacy, the time, the space. So, I do all of my retreats are in beautiful locations where we also then can access nature, so that when you are, complete your journey, you can go and sit and stare at the ocean or sit by a stream, have access to sort of that for the grounding on the flip side.
Mhm,
Um, but, small containers. I think it's really important to do this work like I do it when I do groups,
mm,
small, 6 to 8 people,
mm,
maybe 10 at the most. I
mm,
hear stories of people who are going on these undergrad weekend retreats with like 30 people, and everybody's journeying. No, no, that's not a great setting. So I think small, personal, and you need to really have a trusting relationship with the person who is your guide,
yeah.
so that you really feel like you're emotionally in a safe space with somebody you trust to work with you as well.
Mhm, mm. And what's your relationship to music within all of this? So I keep hearing the new kind of people are now starting to really stress the music. I'm a musician, so this it is all very interesting to me when I'm like, there's this musical element, because I feel like music in and of itself, it can be medicine. It can be
Oh,
really therapeutic.
absolutely.
So how do you see that
Absolutely.
taking like a role in these kind of ceremonies?
Yeah. Well, so I have several soundtracks that I work with for when that I have people download and use when they journey that have been curated. Most of these are by special people in neuroscience who really,
Oh,
it's looking at how to do the hemisync thing on your brain.
interesting.
This is a whole field now. This
Yeah,
is a whole field of
yeah.
curating music for the psychedelic experience
Hmm.
that follows the arc of the journey. I mean, it's a science unto itself.
Hmm.
So I have found a couple of different soundtracks that I just love, that I've used myself, that people have a really positive experience with. So I have a couple that I'm well versed with that I use in my practice.
Hmm.
And originally, when I was in Jamaica, we were using some of the Johns Hopkins music, and some of it has, like Gregorian chants, and it was triggering
I was going to
people's like
say,
religious trauma, like people that had bad experiences, like in the Catholic Church, and they're
yeah,
like, yeah. So you have to really kind of know
yeah,
what, and it can be very cultural. I mean, there's some people for whom you might have had a really bad experience on some trip you took to India, and you don't want to hear that kind of, so there's a certain bit of interviewing people on the upfront too to make sure
yeah,
that something's not too triggering. But some of the triggering music, it's okay to go to that dark place. There's something
right.
to be learned there as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like we're learning so much as we go along. And you're right, this is a whole field now, and music for different brain states and changing things. And it
Yeah.
just feels like I don't know whether there is one ideal program. Like it's
Yeah.
always, because like you say, it's cultural, it's personal to your triggers. There's so many variables.
Yeah.
But I kind of do feel someone once said to me, um, getting medicine into people is never a bad thing. And I was like, I think that's a step beyond what I would say, because that feels a
Yeah.
little risky. But I got what they were trying to say, which is like,
Yeah.
provided we trust the container holder, the space
Yeah.
holder, actually,
Yeah.
then there's a lot of good in allowing people to maybe be a little bit triggered, maybe have kind of
Yeah.
stuff come up. Because almost what's the point if it's a really
Yeah.
easy, like, rainbows and unicorns trip that's
Right.
not showing you much, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Like, I don't know.
Exactly. And I think that's where making sure that on the front end, when we're preparing people,
Yeah.
that we're really looking at what their expectations are, and making sure, because I've had people who do think, oh, it's just gonna be all, giggles and rainbows and butterflies. And
Mhm,
it's like, yeah, no, there might be some darker material, and you need to be okay with that, because there are lessons to be learned there as well.
mhm.
So helping people kind of understand, again, my little throwaway line is always, what meets you is meant for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you mentioned it earlier slightly in terms of if people have got lots of fresh material, it might not be the right time for doing a psilocybin journey. Is there any other kind of like red flags where you'd be like, maybe this isn't it? Or do you find that it's really individual and you kind of just have a sense when you're kind of pre interviewing people?
I would say the latter. I'd say it is sort of a sense when I interview people. But of course, there's the just sort of the usual red flags if somebody has a history of bipolar, or have had manic episodes, or when people are on SSRIs, it's just I just can't figure out the dosing to get them to have an experience, because your
Yeah.
serotonin receptors are otherwise engaged. So
Yeah. And I would love to just talk through what your process is for if you're going on retreat with these people, with a very simple reason that I kind of want people to realize that if the person that they've chosen has not followed some of these steps,
yeah.
maybe it might not be the right person. So do you do like a pre-interview? Is it questionnaires? Is it like, do people have to like go through some kind of secret society to get to you? How does it work with your practice?
You know, I work very small, very boutique, very personal, very bespoke. So I build a rapport and relationship with everybody that I work with. And that is through meetings like we're doing, almost like Zoom meetings. I want to see you. I want to talk to you. I want to meet you. I want to spend time with you. So I do a lot of getting to know people up front through one-on-one sessions. Often it's through Zoom, and then I'll meet them for the weekend if they come on one of my retreats. But I also often like to get the people together who are going to be on the retreat
Yeah,
in a
nice.
call before, so that you sort of meet each other, and that's not a new
A
experience
new
when we
thing.
all arrive.
Yeah.
Uh, and then, the first evening is spent really just doing a lot of getting to know each other. I think it's so important to create that sense of like connection and trust and rapport with everybody who's there on that weekend retreat.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then a lot of very personal processing on the flip side in circle, doing integration circle the following day. We
Yeah.
do a lot with somatics, with movement. I do love to do things with art.
Nice.
And so we do a lot of fun activities on the flip side to really figure out everybody's personal path of what are going to be the best integration tools for you to
Mm,
set up a plan for doing at least 6 sessions post a weekend to have that integration. Some of that individual and some of that as a group. But again, you feel like you're part of a little tribe who's had what I always frame it as, we're doing a really sort of sacred ceremony here together.
yeah.
And we as women, we're evoking this is like plant medicine that I feel like was held very historically by women.
By
So
women.
there's this lovely energy about this is sacred what we're doing. You're going
Mm.
on a sacred journey inward to access your deep inner wisdom and wisdom like greater collective wisdom. And so I really love to frame it like that too.
I love that. And I think what you're speaking to is this isn't just having an experience, it's actually using the experience to do the work. And I think that's a different way to orient. And I think there's a lot of people who are like, I'm going to see my maker and it's going to be awesome. And then it's going to be done. And I'm
Yeah.
like, feel like you may be setting yourself up for failure. There's going to
Yeah.
be effort on the back end.
Yeah.
But I love that. And I really love your, collective women energy, like stressing that as part of this, because it does. I feel very strongly that these plant medicines are coming to women. I know that there's a lot of male researchers, but I know a lot of, you know, whatever we want to call them, high priestess
Yeah.
energies of people who are holding these plant medicines and who are able to hold many and have the energetic archetype of many of the different plant medicines within them and know how to then facilitate those journeys. And I really love that there are more female voices coming forwards, because it kind of feels like this is earth medicine, especially the plant medicines, kind of it's kind of women's thing.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
gonna say it. So yeah. Ah, I've really loved chatting to you. Is there anything that I haven't asked? Is there a massive glaring error that I've missed to ask some element of your work or history or anything? Anything else you'd like to share with my listeners?
Well, I think what pops to mind is that because this is so, it's sort of this new field that's emerging, and I think they're going to be not one flavor is right for everybody. So, I sort of described how I work and how I frame this, and very small, very personal, and a little bit more on the hippie spiritual side of things.
Yep.
But there are going to be people who will be more comfortable doing it in a clinic
Mm-hmm.
with two people staring at them
Mm-hmm.
in a clinic. So I think there's going to be something for everybody. I think it's important that as people explore how to work, what they feel drawn to in this medicine, there will be the retreats. There will also be the clinical setting. So
Mm-hmm.
I think you'll have the opportunity to find what is a fit for you. And just like I always encourage people to interview their therapists, you want to interview the people that you're going to maybe do psychedelic experience with. Don't just buy it hook, like line and sinker from their, you know, Facebook or their website. You need to really interview anybody you're going to work with and feel safe and like you really trust that the process is one that feels like a fit for you.
Yeah, I love that you said that for two reasons. One, also safe enough to go back to them in the integration phase and say, I need a bit more help. I need a bit more kind of like, because they are the one that held that experience and
Yeah.
they should feel able to be there for you. That's really important. And the second one is, I realize a lot that I have biases in this area because I'm a
Yeah.
healthcare professional where I'm like, it has to be done in this way. And I feel like
Yeah.
but you're so right. Some people will feel so much safer in a clinic setting where it feels very medical because they
Yeah.
feel like that's safety for them. To me,
Right.
that would trigger the heck out of me. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's horses for courses. And I really appreciate you sharing that last bit because it's really helpful for me. And I hope for like our listeners that there's, you get to resonate with whatever you resonate with in a
Yeah.
realm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm. Well, thank you for spending time with me.
Yeah.
Anything else that you would like to share? I will put all of the links to places where people can find you and
Oh,
reach
great.
out in our show notes to make sure that they have all of the access that they need. Is there anything else you would like to share for today?
No, always happy to be, on podcasts like this and have these conversations. It's really exciting. I thank you for having me. And I'm happy to be a resource to, any of your guests who want to learn more about my retreats and this work in general. Happy to answer questions and be a resource.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. I've really loved chatting to you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks once again go to Heather for speaking to me on the Unveiled podcast. I was incredibly impressed by her approach and also the way she has really seen transformation and allowed herself and her clients to be transformed. If you would like to know more about Heather's retreats, if you would like to understand more about how and where she does her work, please go to the show notes where you will find all of the available details. You will also find details for Kuya in the show notes, and you are more than welcome to apply now if you are interested in the ketamine-assisted psychotherapy that we will be delivering at Kuya in the near future. For now, all that's left to say is thank you once again for listening to the Unveiled podcast, and I will speak to you next week.